Hi everyone, welcome to 5-Quote Shakespeare Hamlet Theme Analysis. In this series we look at a total of 14 different themes, and in this one we'll look at Machiavellianism, the Dark Triad. What I do in each video is first identify the important aspects of the theme and apply it to the play. And then we dig deeply into the text and pull out several quotes that prove the connection. If you find these videos useful, please like and subscribe and share, and if you make a donation, you'll get a complete set of the PDFs I use in this series. See the description for details. We get the name Machiavellian from this guy. He was a Renaissance Italian political thinker, and he wrote a famous book called The Prince. In that book, he gave his king some great advice about how to be a good ruler. And he's the guy who famously said, "It is better to be feared than loved." So he was a very practical, rather cruel, hard-nosed political thinker. And in Elizabethan England, Machiavellian's political treatise, The Prince, was well known. And Shakespeare probably, we don't quite know for certain, but I would guess that Shakespeare had read that book. And the Machiavel had become a stock character on the stage at that time. So we do have, in a lot of Shakespeare's plays and other plays of the period, these characters that were called Machiavels. They were the sinister villains. We would just call them a villain today. The Machiavel had become a stock character on the stage, and in Hamlet there was one confirmed dark triad type. So I'm going to extend the definition of Machiavellian to include a more modern understanding of the villain, which would be the dark triad type, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So in Hamlet, for sure, Claudius is a Machiavel. He's a dark triad type. He's got all the characteristics of that kind of psychopath, narcissist, and Machiavellian. These guys, Hamlet, Gertrude, and Polonius, they're not quite Machiavel characters, but they do share a lot in common with Claudius, and we're going to break that down today as well. So just a little bit of history that I find kind of interesting. Evolving out of the morality plays, the stock character Vice, the Machiavels appeared in Coriolanus, Richard III, King Lear, Othello, Hamlet, and even Twelfth Night in a comedic form, because the Machiavel was very often depicted in comedic form as well. As a dramatist, Shakespeare was interested in depicting how of evil, how dark triad types operate, and the effects they have on people. Go back and watch Othello if you haven't, and you'll see a perfect villain, Iago. And Shakespeare was fascinated by the psychologies of these psychopaths and how they operated. It's very, very interesting. We do see today, of course, the Coen brothers films. If you haven't watched any of those, you should. You might have seen this one, No Country for Old Men. Well, that's the modern day version of the Machiavel, and he certainly contains these dark triad types, very, very psychopathic, narcissistic, and Machiavellian, which is the manipulation and deception. Just to go back to the morality plays were the medieval form of entertainment, and they came out of the Christian stories, and they were very simple. They were didactic allegories. They were trying to teach people something very, very explicitly, and the hero was the everyman. And if you see here, he's labeled as the everyman, which means all of us, and this guy is death. He's a personification of death, and you had personifications of other virtues and vices as well. And there was one, the Machiavel was actually called the Vice, or Old Vice, he was sometimes called. And Shakespeare would have been familiar with these morality plays coming, before his time, and we see elements of it in his plays as well, particularly the Machiavel. All right, so as I've mentioned, the dark triad characteristics are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathology. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to mix all of these together and identify which ones apply to which characters. And of course, the first one is our chief Machiavel, Claudius. Arrogance, grandiosity, self-interest, of course, these are dark triad characteristics. And surprisingly, it's easier to find evidence of arrogance and grandiosity in Hamlet, actually, than it is in Claudius. But self-interest is very, very evident in Claudius. Most obviously, he killed his brother to get his crown and his wife, so there's self-interest for you. We can also find self-interest here towards the beginning of the play when he's talking to Hamlet, and he says to Hamlet, "For your intent to go back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde to our desire. I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay here in Denmark with us." Now, why? Because he loves his dear nephew? No, not at all. It's self-interest. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. There's a Machiavellian piece of advice for you. That's certainly calculated self-interest. Now, Gertrude agrees and says, "Please don't go away." And Hamlet says, "I will obey you, Mom." And that's a real problem. That's the Oedipal complex too, which we'll talk about in another video. But if you can imagine Harry Potter saying no to Hagrid and not going to Hogwarts, if you can imagine Luke Skywalker in the first trilogy say if the uncle and the aunt hadn't died and he stayed on the planet and hadn't gone on his hero's quest. So that's how self-interested it is. These two, both of them, are denying the development of their son for their own self-interest. Now, arrogance is kind of hard to find evidence of arrogance and grandiosity for Claudius. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if you can find something. But we do see a hint of it here. He's talking about Fortinbras and how Fortinbras of Norway is rattling the sabers, trying to regain lands that had been captured in the past. And Claudius says, Fortinbras hath not failed to pester us with message importing the surrender of those lands lost by his father with all bands of law to our most valiant brother. So much for him. So I see a little bit of arrogance here in that when we are arrogant and full of our own sense of grandiosity, we can be blind to the strengths of others because we think that we of course are stronger than everybody else. And so what happens here is words like pester. It's like a fly. This Fortinbras guy is just like a fly. And then he okay, well this is what we've heard from Norway, and well, so much for him. And then he moves on. He delivers a letter. He gives a letter to his diplomats and says, well, that'll take care of him. So that's a kind of arrogance that creates a fatal blind spot. But self-interest more so than the arrogance and the grandiosity. That's evident. Okay, so the next set, manipulation, deception, exploitation, and superficial charm. These are psychopathic traits that are very, very much evident regarding Claudius. We have all encountered psychopaths in our lives, maybe not murderous psychopaths, but certainly psychopaths that have this tremendous charm. That's one of the characteristics of the psychopath, the dark triad type. They have that. With that charm, they can manipulate, deceive, and exploit the people around them, and they're very, very good at it. And we don't even know that we're surrounded by these people until they reveal themselves through some kind of action where you're shocked and feeling stupid because you've been duped by these guys. But we shouldn't feel stupid because they're very, very good at what they do. High intelligence is also a part of the package of these guys, so it makes it hard to see them. And look at this at the very, very beginning. We see in this particular scene here where he's again, it's a courtly announcement of his marriage and some political dealings as well. And he says here, when he's announcing his marriage, he says to the court, he says, "Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along, for all our thanks." So he's announcing his marriage to Gertrude 4 months after the husband died, do you see? And so it's a little bit dodgy. But look what he does here. By saying to the court, he's saying, "You have sanctioned this, and I'm grateful for your kind, wise words of advice." That's all smoke and mirrors. What he's really doing here is he's charming these guys by saying, "You were important to this process. Thank you very much for your wisdom. I wouldn't have done it. I couldn't have made the wise decision without you, you see." But at the same time, he's wagging his finger at these guys and saying, "Remember, you can't judge me for marrying Gertrude so soon because you sanctioned this." Very, very, very smart, manipulative, deceptive, exploitative, charming. Here's another example here, the ghost. So this would be King Hamlet, the murdered brother of Claudius. He says, when he visits Hamlet, he says, "With witchcraft of his wits," there it is, we've already seen it, "with traitorous gifts, O wicked wit, and gifts that have the power to seduce, one to his shameful lust, the will of my most seeming virtuous queen." Now the will means in this case, it means the sexual desire of my queen. So this is evidence that they actually had an affair. So Claudius and Gertrude had an affair while the husband was still alive. Great seducer. That's another thing. Women have to watch out for these psychopaths because they're so charming and manipulative and deceptive and exploitative. Well, there you go. What do you see there? You see a bad date is what you see, a bad boyfriend. And King Hamlet recognizes these traits in his brother. Too late, do you see? So even the brother, who was obviously, at least somewhat close to the smiling villain brother, even he didn't recognize it. So that's how good these psychopaths can be. We see it down here as well when he's manipulating cruelly, Machiavellianly exploits poor old Laertes, who is by the end of the play, by the middle and the end of the play, he is an emotional wreck. And you want to manipulate somebody, you find an emotional wreck, and they're very, very easy to manipulate. And here's Claudius manipulating poor Laertes. He does this in several places too, and it's just brutal. So Claudius says, "What would you undertake to show yourself indeed your father's son more than in words? Hamlet killed your father. And are you a man? You want to show yourself a man in your deeds and not just your words, and you want to get revenge. That's what you want, right? This is a revenge play, so you got to get revenge." And Laertes immediately, so emotionally distraught, he says, "I will do anything to get revenge. I would cut his throat in the church," do you see? So exploitation, emotional manipulation. The perfect psychopath, the perfect Machiavel. Okay, so let's look at lack of empathy, callousness, lack of emotion, and remorselessness. Dark Triad types will do anything for their own self-interest, to preserve their own security, to get what they want, and they have no remorse whatsoever. And that's very, very much evident with Claudius. We see here in Act 4, when he wants to get rid of Hamlet. He wants to kill Hamlet, but he's married to Hamlet's mom, and Hamlet's mom loves him very much. Is that going to stand in his way? No way. So he says to Laertes, he says, "The queen, his mother, lives almost by his looks, so she hangs on him." This is the Oedipal. The bond is too close, probably, between these two. But she lives almost by his looks. "But even his mother shall uncharge the practice and call it accident. I have a plan, Laertes, that is so devious and so clever and so perfect that the mom won't recognize that it's not an accident. Do you see? She won't even suspect anything." So look what he's willing to do here. This killing Hamlet might kill the one woman I love, but I'm worth it. That's the Dark Triad right there, do you see? And we see a similar thing down here as well. At the very, very end of the play, this particular version, this is my favorite version. This is the 2009 David Tennant version. And this actor, Penny Down, I think it is, she does a brilliant job of Gertrude. And at the very, very end, when she goes to drink the poison, we're waiting for his reaction. What is he going to do as she goes to drink the poison? Do you see the poison cup? And here's his response. He says to her, fair enough, he's married to her. Maybe he loves her if a psychopath is capable of love. And so he says, "Do not drink, Gertrude, don't drink." She says, "I will. I pray you pardon me." And then she drinks. And then aside, he says, "It is the poison cup. It is too late." Now, within that time, if he truly loved her, he could have run up and bashed it out of her hand, do you see? Right here, he could have spoken out and pushed her aside violently to save her life. But that would have revealed the fact that he's trying to poison Hamlet. So what comes first, love of others or self-preservation? For the psychopath, for the Dark Triad type, it's self-preservation. So we see that here. And even when she falls down, and this is the quote here where she actually falls down now with the poison and she's dying. And everybody's looking, do you see? And now he's got the spotlight on him, and he's got to preserve himself. What's his instinct do? Everyone says, or Hamlet says, "How does the queen? What's wrong with the queen? She fell down." And Claudius, instead of weeping, he instead of reacting to the death of the woman he supposedly loves, he says, "Oh, she just fainted because she sees you guys bleeding. That's all." Do you see? So his only reaction is self-interest. That's what kicks him off, not any other emotion for anybody else but himself. Do you see? We see it again here. We see even before this. This is just as damning. This is this particular scene here. Now remember, Ophelia dies. She commits suicide, and Laertes is distraught because the father has died. And then they hear. So what happens here is he manipulates Laertes right here he manipulates Laertes here. And here to kill Hamlet, do you see? And he calmed Laertes down. Laertes was going to kill him, and he manipulates him into agreeing to kill Hamlet. And then they both get news that Ophelia has died, do you see? And then afterwards, Laertes leaves. And what's Claudius's reaction to hearing about the death of Ophelia, a family friend who, he watched her grow up, and he should have a avuncular affection for her. What's his reaction? He says no. His only reaction to the news of Ophelia's tragic death is, How much I had to do to calm Laertes' rage. I worked on him and I worked on him and I worked on him, and now I fear this will give it start again. So now I have to manipulate him all over again. All of that hard work I did has been undone by the inconvenient news of Ophelia's death, do you see? It's terrible. It's only an inconvenience to him. Now, in this scene, it's brilliantly directed and brilliantly acted. She's distraught by the news of Ophelia's death, and she actually physically reaches out to him, and she wants to hold his hand for comfort. That's what a husband and wife are for, to comfort each other during the inevitable tragedies of life. And look at him. He's only looking at Laertes. He's only looking at Laertes walk off, and he's thinking, now I got to do more work. And she's stunned. This is where she starts to realize that maybe I'm not married to the man I thought I was married to. Very, very interesting. Okay, insecurity, need for admiration, and envy of others. Narcissists are narcissists very often, or equally as often. They're narcissists because they're actually weak. They actually don't love themselves. They actually hate themselves, and they mask that self-loathing with an exterior of excessive self-love. So narcissism is very often based on insecurity rather than a true sense of one's superiority. And I think we see this in Claudius as well. This insecurity, this need for admiration and envy of others. Why would Cain kill his brother? In the biblical tradition, that's the original murder as the brother Cain kills Abel. I'm going to talk about that in another video. I've talked about it elsewhere as well. It's very important to this play, and a lot of Shakespeare's plays, actually, Macbeth too. We see the brother murder theme and motif a lot. So why did Claudius kill his brother? Why would any brother kill another brother? The younger brother kills the older brother most often. We see it today with Prince Harry and William, isn't it? You know, there's the scandal these days about the younger brother being left out of the picture. I don't follow it very closely, but you pick this stuff up because it's part of our culture at the moment. But that's the same theme being repeated again and again and again and again. It doesn't go away because we're human beings. So I think that King Hamlet was a bullying older brother, probably superior, maybe physically. There's hints that he was physically superior in his looks and in his physique, perhaps, maybe mentally, maybe not. Because, as we've seen, Claudius is pretty darn clever himself. But we don't have reliable sources for this because King Hamlet himself calls his younger brother a twerp, basically, do you see? So we can't really trust that because that's the biased opinion of one guy. But you put all this stuff together, and just the simple fact that a brother would go to the extreme of killing a brother suggests that there was something going on and throughout their childhoods and right up until the present time that would cause Cain to kill Abel, you see. Resentment of the older brother overshadowing the younger brother. So here's what the ghost says. He says, "Oh, Hamlet, what a falling off was there. My wife Gertrude fell from me, the sun god, to this satyr, this half goat, half animal creature." Do you see? This is what the older brother says. "Oh, Hamlet, what a falling off was there from me, and to decline upon a wretch whose natural gifts were poor to those of mine." Now, do we trust that voice? Probably. I think so. Again, the evidence that I will put forth is that the fact that Cain did kill Abel, suggesting that, yeah, he did feel resentful. Because if they were equals, there would be no need for this kind of resentment, do you see? Resentment is a nasty, nasty, nasty attitude. Resentment, shadow of the older brother, that's what caused the murder, do you see? Hamlet says the same thing, but again, he's biased because he loves his brother and he hates Claudius. So excellent a king was to this Hyperion to a satyr. This is in one of his soliloquies. My father was the sun god, and this guy is the half-goat satyr. Do you see what I mean? He's an animal. He's a beast. And again, there's probably some truth in that. It's probably exaggerated, but there's probably some truth. So the envy of Cain, the need to prove oneself, that suggests insecurity, this need for admiration, and the envy, resentment is a nasty thing. And that all leads to this antisocial behavior. We can't leave this out because that's one of the primary traits of the psychopath especially. This is more narcissism up here, and this is the psychopathology. Antisocial behavior, well, you kill your brother. There you go. That's all the evidence you really need for antisocial behavior, but we get some other things as well here. So yeah, the ghost says, "Thus was I, sleeping by a brother's hand, of life, of crown, of queen, at once dispatched. So I was murdered in my sleep." So antisocial behavior. It's the logical extreme of resentment and the need to prove oneself. Yeah, that's where it all comes from. And Shakespeare says in many of his plays that the root of evil is that kind of resentment, that sense of injustice and the need to prove oneself. We see it more again here. We see that antisocial behavior here in his cunningness, in his ability to his psychopathic, clever, intelligent understanding of human weaknesses and the ability to, in a predatory way, to exploit those weaknesses. And so he says here to Laertes, when they're planning the murder of Hamlet, he says, "Hamlet being remiss, he's careless because he's too naive. Most generous and free from all contriving, he's naive." That's what a good psychopath can do. They're predators and they can spot the naive sheep among the naivest zebras on the plain, the weakest, and they can track them down. Hamlet, he's naive and he won't look at the swords, he won't look at the poison on the D, on the sharp end of the foil. He won't look at that, so we can easily get him. Now, there's a counter-argument here that I have to bring up because this fooled me as well. Like a good psychopath, Claudius was able to fool me. Shakespeare was able to fool us. He has Claudius express what seems to be remorse at several times, and this is one of those times here. You can see his face. He looks concerned. Is it real remorse, though? Now, if he expresses remorse, as he does in his soliloquy, the "Now might I do it, Pat," Hamlet is just about to kill him, but Claudius is praying for forgiveness. Not quite, do you see? Here he is during that soliloquy, and he says, I want to pray to God for forgiveness, but I can't because I still have my queen and my crown, and it's ridiculous because heaven won't forgive me. But he says maybe heaven will. He's trying to make a bargain with heaven here in this particular speech, and he says, "In heaven there is no shuffling. There the action lies. My actions, my cruel actions, lie in their true nature. Here on earth there's lots of shuffling. Shuffling means deceptions, and you can trick everyone here on earth like he's taken advantage of. You can exploit people on earth, but in heaven you can't, because heaven will judge you in your true nature." Now, is that remorse? He goes on and on and on. It's a whole soliloquy in this vein. Is it remorse? There's no remorse at all. If it was true remorse, he would have had fear not for his own soul. He would have had fear for his brother's soul. His brother was murdered, unhouseled, disappointed, and unannealed, which means he wasn't given final unction. He wasn't given the blessings of a priest before he moved on into the next world, which means his soul is now in purgatory because he hasn't been forgiven and washed of his sins. It's fear. It's strictly fear. It's not remorse. There's no concern for the brother at all. In no speech anywhere does he mention, "Oh, my poor brother, what did I do? What did I do? I shouldn't have done it. Oh, you are now in purgatory because of me. I'm so sorry." All he's concerned about is his own soul going to hell. He's definitely going to hell because this is a Christian era and they did believe in a literal hell. So here we see that as well. Polonius, in one of his weird, wise words, Polonius is full of wise words and wise advice, none of which he follows himself. He says here, "'Tis too much proof that with devotion's visage we can pretend to be pious," like Claudius was praying here and later on in Act 3. "With devotion's face," visage means simply face, it's not the heart, but the face, "in pious action we do sugar or the devil himself." So we can be the devil on the inside, but we can sugarcoat that and we can present a nice view to the world. Now that triggers a similar feeling as this. Oh yes, I can do that. I can sugar over the whole world. I'm a good psychopath and I can deceive everyone, but I can't deceive God, you see. And he has that feeling here. He says, "Oh, 'tis too true. How smart a lash that speech does give my conscience." Now when I first read that, the first couple of times I read that without kind of just glossing over because I got other things to think about in the play, you think, oh yeah, he does have remorse. He is a complex character. He does feel bad about killing his brother. I don't think so at all. And that nails it for me. His brother was unhustled, disappointed, and unannealed. His soul is going to purgatory, and he doesn't mention anything about it. So he says, yes, that your words about the devil and sugaring over the devil himself makes me think of my own heavy burden of the lies, my most painted words. I am that deceiver, and I'm going to go to hell for it. Do you see? So Shakespeare, clever. He keeps us on our toes. He doesn't give us an easy portrait of somebody. So that there's a counter argument. You have to address that, though. Several times Claudius seems to express remorse. However, he regrets only his soul's own mortal danger. Very, very interesting storytelling. Very, very complex. Okay, let's have a look at Hamlet. And that was 5 quotes Shakespeare, Hamlet, theme analysis, Machiavellianism, dark triad. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, come back for my other videos and like and subscribe, and pick up a copy of the PDFs if you need them. Thanks for watching.